High above a sleepy village, where the air was crisp and the pines whispered with the wind, stood a small tea house, its walls weathered bamboo, its roof a gentle slope of thatch. Inside lived Hana, a Zen tea master known far and wide, not for grand speeches or dazzling displays, but for the quiet way she served tea, her hands moving like a soft breeze, her eyes holding a stillness that unsettled even the boldest visitors. One foggy morning, a young scholar named Daichi climbed the winding stone steps to her door, wearing fine robes, his chin held high, a satchel stuffed with scrolls slung over his shoulder. He'd studied under the greatest teachers, memorized every text, won every debate, and now he'd heard of Hana's wisdom and came to test it, certain he'd leave victorious. Hana greeted him with a bow, her gray hair tied back simply, the tea house bare around her, a low wooden table, a single cushion, and a window framing a garden of raked sand and moss. Daichi smirked at the simplicity, expecting more from a so-called master, and declared, "I'd like tea, but I'm not here for that alone. I've come to discuss true wisdom," boasting that he'd read every scroll, argued every point, mastered the classics like Confucius, Laozi, and the sutras, believing wisdom was knowledge. The more you knew, the wiser you became, and challenging her with, "Tell me, tea master, what do you say to that?" Hana said nothing, shuffling to a small hearth where a kettle hummed over glowing coals, while Daichi's voice filled the room with his confident speech. She returned with a tray, a plain clay teapot, and 2 cups, one for each of them, and began pouring tea into Daichi's cup, the steam rising in delicate curls, the amber liquid filling it to the brim. But she didn't stop. She kept pouring, and the tea spilled over the edge, pooling on the table, dripping onto the floor, until Daichi cried out, "Stop! What are you doing? The cup's full. It can't hold any more." Hana paused, her hand steady, and looked at him with those calm, piercing eyes, explaining, "Like this cup, your mind is too full. It overflows with what you know, leaving no room for anything new. How can I teach you if you're already brimming?" Daichi froze, his mouth half open, words failing him for the first time as he stared at the puddle of tea, then at Hana, who sipped from her own cup as if nothing had happened. Anger flared in his chest. He'd come to debate, not be mocked by a spilled drink, and he demanded, "Is this your wisdom? Wasting tea to prove a point? I expected more from you." Hana replied that he'd expected more, or perhaps wanted more, adding, "A cup must be empty to receive, just as a mind must be." But Daichi scoffed, grabbed his satchel, and stormed out, his fine robes swishing as he descended the misty mountain path. The stones were slick, and his foot slipped, sending him tumbling, his satchel spilling open, scrolls scattering, and his golden teacup, a gift from a wealthy patron, rolling down the slope to shatter against a rock. Sitting in the mud, staring at the broken pieces, his pride felt as cracked as the cup. Days passed, then weeks, and though Daichi returned to his studies, Hana's words gnawed at him. A cup must be empty, sticking like a splinter he couldn't argue away. One night, under a full moon, he packed a simpler bag, no scrolls, no golden cups, and climbed back to the tea house, knocking softly this time. Hana opened the door, unchanged, as if she'd been expecting him, and he admitted, "I've come back, not to argue, but to listen. Can you teach me?" She smiled, a small, warm curve of her lips, and gestured to the cushion, bringing the same clay teapot and plain cups, pouring just enough this time, the tea settling still and clear in his cup. She asked, "Tell me, what do you hear?" And Daichi frowned, unsure, opening his mouth to answer before stopping himself, noticing for the first time the silence, the soft rustle of wind through the pines, the distant trickle of a stream, the faint crackle of the hearth. Realizing he'd been so full of his own voice, he'd never heard the world around him. He told her, "I hear everything. The wind, the fire, the quiet. Something I never noticed before." And Hana explained, "That's where wisdom begins. Not in what you know, but in what you allow yourself to learn." They sat together, sipping tea, saying little, and Daiichi felt a strange lightness, as if years of heavy scrolls had lifted from his shoulders. He stayed with Hana for days, then weeks, learning not from lectures, but from the stillness she embodied. Raking the garden, fetching water, watching the seasons turn, his mind slowly emptying of pride and noise, making room for something deeper. When he finally left the tea house, he didn't return to the debating halls or scholars' circles, but settled in the village below, living simply, listening more than he spoke. People came to him, not for grand answers, but for the peace he carried, calling him wise, though he never claimed the title. Sometimes on quiet evenings, he'd climb back to Hana's tea house, where she'd pour him a cup. Just enough, never too much. The broken golden cup stayed on the hillside, a glittering ruin overtaken by moss, a reminder of what Daiichi had let go and what he'd gained in its place. Hana's lesson had been simple, yet reshaped him. Wisdom isn't a pile of knowledge to hoard, but a space to fill with wonder.